today I'm excited to have Matt Riley in the studio. Matt is the founder and CEO as well.
Sure. Yeah.
CEO,
Shepherd.
Shepherd, whatever you want to call it, of Stanza, which is an Airbnb of office space, and Matt will fill in the gaps there. But really interesting concept, based out of St. George, and I'm excited to have him here in the studio. So
thanks, Chase. Good to be here.
Yeah,
I'm stoked for this.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
So usually what I ask my guests first, Matt, just to give us a little context, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, to talk about your upbringing a little bit, childhood years, early years, like anything formative or something that happened there that kind of led you to be who you are today.
Yeah, for sure. And just as a side note, if anyone's listening and they know me and they know my voice, I'm a little hoarse just from a few days ago. I had an extreme karaoke incident, which anyone who knows me also will not be surprised by that. But yeah, so let's talk about my childhood, right? I think that there were two main influences that shaped how I approach entrepreneurship, like as an adult. One of which was my father had, I would call it an academic approach. Like every year he would buy the Forbes 400, sit down with me on the couch and say, okay, son, like, instead of talking about the birds and the bees, like his way of teaching me how to become a man was like read about Bill Gates and Larry Ellison back in the day when they were becoming billionaires. And so he early on kind of instilled within me this idea that like you can do big things and they can have an impact on the world. And so that academic approach was kind of curated by my dad. And then my mom, both my parents, right? Like my mom had this other thing that was true about her, which was she was obsessed with creating things. So she would have an idea for something crafty. And I use that word only because that just is the best way to describe it. It maybe sounds a little bit small scale, but like she had like lots of companies that she started because she would just like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, you know what? Like diaper bags should function differently. And she would go grab clothing and like curtains or whatever and like rip it apart and deconstruct stuff and like spend all night long sewing and like building prototypes.
Wow.
And that's just one example, but she was a builder, she was a creator, and she had that thing in her brain where once she conceived of an idea and knew that something should exist that didn't exist, she literally couldn't sleep until she had prototyped it. And so she was kind of a serial entrepreneur creator. So I think that context shaped a lot about how I view the world now, right? And at the time, this was Southern California. I would call it middle upper class upbringing, and those two things I think have been really useful ingredients for kind of the way I approach my career these days.
Yeah. It sounds like more of a structure. Learning about successful individuals from your father, and then the creative, implementation side from your mother. It sounds like a good teaching, where you were able to learn and understand how those dynamics.
I don't know that I would have known about the concept of like owning a company if my dad hadn't like walked me through all of that. But then I don't know that I would have had the energy and the passion to like put in the blood, sweat, and tears if I didn't inherit that from my mom. It's a really good combo. I felt really lucky for that. Yeah,
very cool. How did you like growing up in Southern California?
I loved it. The only thing that was like a delta for me was that I was awful at surfing. For like 2 years, I tried surfing and was going every weekend with my buddies, and they were all like awesome, right? Be getting like pro surfers basically, and then I just was terrible. So I ended up becoming like the videographer. So I'd grab the video camera and try to capture videos of them having a really good time while I'm sitting there getting, cooked on the beach. But joke's on them, because I leaned into music eventually and then really thrived in kind of the early 90s hardcore straight edge punk scene down in Southern California. It was like the Camelot years of music down there.
Did you play an instrument or sing, or did you?
I was guitarist in a bunch of bands and wrote a bunch of really shitty songs and
right on, man.
For sure.
That's great. That was a great, music era, like that 90s,
really fun.
Early 90s, late 90s, that's just classic good stuff, man. That's fun. That's fun. Speaking of surfing, so I was in LA for a few years, and the only way I could ever get up on a wave was if I went and got the big Costco like
the big foam
board,
like 9 foot long.
It had to be the perfect wave.
Dude, no, I wish I had been smart enough to think of that, because I was like toiling with like my shoulder and back strength trying to catch waves on these like tiny short boards.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a much better experience if someone had told me like, oh, well, you should just go buy a longboard.
Yeah,
it's way more
tops.
fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way to do it these days for me, at least.
Yeah.
So, right on. So, growing up Southern California, you went to college? If I remember reading your bio right, where did you go and what was that experience like?
I did accounting at BYU.
Yeah.
Which, like, people that encounter me these days, I think if I gave them 1,000 guesses of what I studied, that probably wouldn't hit like the top 1,000, right? But I liked it actually, though. I kind of dug it. Like, I liked studying accounting, but I never wanted to work in accounting. It was just like a toolkit, because I was trying to write business plans, and so I will never forget. I was like 4 months away from graduating with my degree. I'm married, and life responsibilities are right at my doorstep, and I had been writing this business plan. At the time, there was this thing called the E-Business Center at BYU. This is like 2000, 2001.
Okay.
And I had this business plan that was like, I think it was like 60 pages long, of how I was going to conduct peer-to-peer transactions using cell phones and create like a proxy merchant account so that you could do like credit card payments to your friends to their personal bank accounts, right? It was basically PayPal.
Yeah.
And PayPal did exist, but I was too dumb to know about it at the time. So it wasn't like I was creating something new. Like, it did exist. But so I had this big, huge business plan. I'm a few weeks away from graduating, or a few months away from graduating, and suddenly I like wake up one day and realize, I haven't raised $10 million. And no one is like even whiffing at writing a check to invest in this. And I think I need to get a job. And so I start scrambling and ditch the business plan, start calling all the accounting firms, and got a job offer. And so kind of like stumbled into Ernst & Young, and literally the first day on the job, right? I'm in a big training room with my cohort, and I look around and like I see a partner come in, and a partner's like, here's what it is to be a partner at Ernst & Young. And literally the first day I just look around and I was like, I have made a huge mistake. Like, this is not for me. So anyway, eventually was able to pivot into tech sales with Cisco.
Yeah.
Got an MBA along the way. But I feel like the tech sales training at Cisco was really like my foundational entry-level work as an adult in the career path, so.
How long did you stick it out at EY?
Maybe 1 year.
Okay.
It was probably about 1 year.
Yeah, was it an audit that you were doing?
It was audit,
side?
yes.
Okay.
I made it through a busy season, and I was interviewing with like investment banks, and eventually just went to grad school instead. But it was a year.
Got it. Yeah, I totally share the sentiment. So I studied accounting, as I mentioned earlier, before we started. And I went into the program like it's a good foundation. It's going to lay the bricks for kind of maybe what I want to do later. But similar to you, like those first information sessions from the partners at the accounting firms, I was like, I don't think this is going to work for me. But no, it's a good experience, and I'm sure,
Well, the program, like you probably remember this, right? Like the program was so curated, right? You're at BYU, you have to apply to get into the Marriott School, and then you have to apply again to get in the accounting program. And so there's this perception of exclusivity and prestige. And to me, it almost didn't matter like what the subject matter was. I was like, well, whatever the hardest thing is to get into,
exactly.
I need people to think that I'm cool and smart. And so like that is what I shall do.
Exactly. That's very similar to me as well. Yeah. It was like, what's the hardest thing? And ended up working out. Well, that's great. That's great, Matt. So tell us a little bit about the MBA decision, because you were formulating this business plan at BYU.
Yeah.
It sounded like you wanted to do something entrepreneurial, pivoted kind of to get some security, it sounds like. But what was the decision to go back to school and get an MBA?
Just to buy myself time, like truly, right? I mean, I went back academically. The MBA was a gigantic step backwards, which isn't a knock on the program that I was in. It's just that the nature of an MBA, like the first year, they're trying to bring everybody up to speed. Like the people that studied art history or English or non-business topics, they have to teach them accounting and principles of finance and organizational behavior. And I had so much of that already that like I was the TA for the classes that I was in. It was mostly to buy time. And what I think I realized subconsciously was that my motives for entrepreneurship were yet to be refined. I think that when I was writing the business plan at BYU, I wanted to write the business plan because I thought it was cool. I thought I wanted to be a founder, and I thought that I wanted to like be on the cover of a magazine or something, right?
Yeah.
That's all and I wanted to be a billionaire, and I wanted to be in the Forbes 400, that the next issue that my dad was going to buy. And I think as you know, and probably some of the other guests have shared or learned, the work of founding is so removed from all of that. Like the real work of it is very non-glamorous, and you have to be like obsessed with solving a problem, right? And so it was a good reset for my career to kind of rediscover myself and say, okay, purify my motives. Don't found something because of the glory of entrepreneurship and the riches. Like wait until the time is right. Like wait until there's some problem like really calling to you, and where you kind of like my mom, right? Where you can't sleep at night until you have started to like prototype and solve this thing that just is ruining your life somehow, right? And in the absence of that, the thing that made the most sense to me was to just put myself into a career position to learn useful skills and meet as many other people as humanly possible. So working for like a big tech company like Cisco was perfect, because that cohort that I started with at Cisco, like these are people that I still talk to weekly, and it's been almost 20 years.
Sure.
And they're all ambitious, and we're all like getting certifications together, and we're learning hard things. And, I come from an accounting background, and then I'm learning how to configure routers and switches and like understanding the internet backbone, which over time became really germane to the conversations I would start to have as my career evolved.
Yeah, love it. And you touched on motivation, and to your point, it is something that I've heard over and over again as I've talked with entrepreneurs. Is money can be a motivator, but it's not enough to sustain you through those tough times as a founder and getting something off the ground. It really has to be something you're passionate about, or you're trying to solve a problem, like you said. I remember when I was probably 13, my grandpa asked me, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be rich." And his response was, "Well, if that's all you ever want, then you'll never get it." And,
interesting.
And so I think there has to be something more.
Yes, it must be coupled with other elements.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a minor ingredient. It's a seasoning, not a main dish.
Yeah, and it typically comes as you successfully pursue a passion. If you love something enough, or you're good enough at something, or developing a skill set, or you're adding enough value to someone, it typically is it's a spit off of those other functions.
Yes, I agree with that. I think it's like a natural output.
Yes, exactly.
So focus on the inputs. That output will take care of itself.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe in that.
So did you do Cisco? Was that post MBA?
Yes, that was post MBA. So that put me in Southern California, mid 2000s, and I was selling to the Hollywood studios. MySpace existed at the time, and so I was helping them build data centers. And I was entry level. I don't want to like overstate my role in building out the MySpace data centers, but that was the team that I probably spent the most time with. That kind of paid my bills, I would say.
Cool. And it was tech sales, or were you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was purely like literally like walking into data centers and like selling high capacity switches and high throughput switches and routers almost exclusively.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And I noted that Cisco, PBM. Was it Alcatel?
Yes.
So did you had gone through various types of sales, tech sales type roles?
All kind of within that same ecosystem. I'm selling the same types of solutions, mostly data center routers and switches, and a little bit of like compute, server capacity, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And all within like that Hollywood media and entertainment ecosystem.
Got it.
Which sounds really cool, right? Like you go to a party and you're like, oh yeah, I sell to Hollywood studios and I was just at the lot getting, well, it doesn't matter. I don't know, is this a PG or is this PG-13?
It's like PG-13.
PG-13, okay.
You know, you be yourself. Yeah, all good.
Cool. Telling stories about like actors that you're, interacting with, and it sounds really cool at parties. At the end of the day, the money is just like any other industry. Like it's they either have budget that they're spending or they don't. And so like the excitement of saying that you sell to Hollywood studios like only puts so much wind in your sails. At the end of the day, like is it like balancing the budget of your life? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And I think that I was observing friends of mine. I'm selling hardware, right? I'm selling switches, and the amount of time that I spent like calling UPS and like tracking packages was higher than the amount that I wanted to be. I'll put it that way. And all of my buddies were like selling software, and it just looked like a cleaner delivery of a solution to me. I was like, okay, they're delivering a solution. People are paying them for it. And then they're not wasting their time with tracking numbers and shipping delays and things like that. It just didn't make sense. And so that was when I pivoted into software. And a buddy of mine that had worked at Cisco together, we overlapped for several years at Cisco. Ryan Wiedek, he calls me one day. He's like, hey, I'm leaving Cisco. I'm going to move to St. George, Utah. We're going to do the software startup. And this other guy that I know has founded a company, and we're going to go in and build it together. And instantly, I felt like this was an adventure that I wanted to join. And so we moved the family up to St. George, and that went well, right? I helped build out the sales team, helped build out like the channel program, and it was an interesting opportunity to be like founder adjacent, right? I wasn't a founder or a co-founder. But I had front row seats to all of the lessons of like building a team and implementing systems and like incorporating legal and HR and like, building out insurance, like all these things that you do to create a company that scales. And I witnessed so many different like opportunities for learning. And so, within a few years, there were moments where I would be like sitting in rooms with other founders and they're all telling their stories. And it got to a point where no one could share stories anymore, where they would bring in like a new lesson that I hadn't already witnessed like firsthand, maybe 2 or 3 times.
Sure.
And so I say that to just say that like that experience with Ryan and with Jarrett Taylor was so valuable for me. Not only in like kind of building out some initial amount of wealth, but in learning kind of like what's it like to launch a startup from someone who's adjacent to it all. Right. Super interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure incredibly valuable, right? To be able to sit at their footsteps and see that whole process. As it's happening, and that's something that again on this podcast I've heard like and I don't know what your structure was or compensation, but a lot of times people say, hey, be willing to take a pay cut if you can sit and learn, at the feet of an entrepreneur or a founder for, just to figure out how it's done so that you can gain that skill set.
I think that one of the things that I realized is if you look at like the billionaire data set, you have however many billionaires there are. I don't even know what that number is, right? Maybe a couple thousand or I don't know who, whatever it is.
Right.
Whatever it is. There's a few thousand billionaires. And I respect all of them. But one of the things that I see sometimes is that when they are telling their stories, sometimes that survivorship bias sneaks in and they'll say, well, I am a billionaire because I did these 1 or 2 things. I think it was like Steve Jobs at one of the commencement addresses that he did. He was like, well, Apple exists because I took a calligraphy class. And he's being a little bit cute, probably with, the way he's describing his lore. But at the same time, there are people who are kind of like trying to create a formula to become a billionaire. And they're saying, okay, so I got to take weird ass classes and then I'll become a billionaire. and it just is it's a small enough data set that it becomes statistically difficult to extrapolate meaningful lessons out of, I think. But if you expand out a little bit and say, okay, well, let's look at like 50, 100 millionaires, you have a like orders of magnitude larger data set there. And so that becomes a little bit more interesting to look at, okay, what are the patterns that we see there? And to me, this is where this idea of, okay, if you're not founding something, if you have an opportunity to found something and it's calling to you and it's keeping you up at night and you're instrumented in a way that you can attack that problem, do it, right? But if not, become founder adjacent in the meantime, and be in the front row along with somebody else who is doing that. And I think that that's an awesome stepping stone towards somebody's own founding journey. But that's me telling, what it was like for me. And so I'm a huge fan of that motion, right? Of like, find founders and be useful to them in those early stages, and you'll learn a lot. And then when it is your time, you've been able to shortcut some of those hard lessons. Yeah,
100%. And so the company you left California, was that PrinterLogic in St.
PrinterLogic was the startup in St. George, yes, that I moved to.
Got it. Okay, yes. Cool. And how long were you with PrinterLogic?
I want to say it was about 8 years.
8 years. Yeah. Okay. In various
roles.
So
fun. Yeah. Building out sales team, channels team. And then we had a bunch of customers just sort of organically in Europe. The message resonated with them, and a lot of them in Germany in particular. And so we started hiring remote employees, engineers, and salespeople in Germany. And so we ended up moving my family out there to build out a team to support the EMEA region. So we lived in Germany for a couple of years with the company, and it was just like the adventure of a lifetime, right?
I bet.
So fun and so interesting. And what was interesting about that was that it felt like we were our own startup a little bit.
Sure.
And I remember the company at the time globally had hundreds of employees. And so we had about 10 in Germany. And I had this one employee who he was someone who wanted to come in every day and sort of follow a recipe. And I kept telling him, like, we are like a startup right now. We don't really have a recipe. There's a lot of questions that we have to be asking ourselves, and we need to go out and find the answers to these things, because the way it worked in the US might not be the same as how it's going to work here, in Germany and in Europe. And so that was a really interesting, very entrepreneurial experience. And I noticed that with the employees that I had out there, those who could live in that headspace of ambiguity and comfort with lack of information and lack of instruction, they thrived. And the people looking for like really strict, well-defined roles and well-defined like expectations of this or that, they struggled.
Sure.
And I think that that's true, like with the first 20, 30, 40 employees of a startup, right?
Yep.
You have to kind of jump in and say, my job description is very fuzzy and it's faded and it kind of moves around a lot. And if you can live in that space, then you're in the right place.
Yeah, and it's a big adjustment. Like for me, coming from like a JP Morgan and these more corporate roles, going into start my own business, it is a big adjustment to understand you have to wear multiple hats. You're working on some accounting reporting one day, and then you're selling something the next day, and you're in a financial model the next day. It's just like you kind of have to do everything. But it's a necessity in those early days until you can kind of build the recurring revenue or platform to be able to supplement some of those roles and
yes.
It. So
I think there's some virtue to it as well, like the getting into all the different disciplines in those early stages, and sort of like manually running those early cycle processes.
Mm-hmm.
In the future, when you start to instrument with tools and with solutions that are going to come in and like automate or make things better, or you're going to hire services or providers, it gives you a little bit of fluency across all the disciplines, so that no one can like come in and like smoke screen you a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So with PrinterLogic, you were there for about 8 years. What was the ultimate, goal going into that company? Was it, hey, I've got some equity, or I want to, obviously you learned a lot in the role, but when you left, was there some catalyst that you'd done X, or what was the exit like there?
Yeah, no, it was. I'm best friends with those guys, right? And now they're called Vasion, just if anyone's trying to triangulate the data. But when I left, it was still called PrinterLogic, just on the cusp of switching over to Vasion. But yes, I think that I really was feeling the call of getting back to something early stage, where you're kind of like floating on a spacewalk, reaching into the void. And just had a lot of frank conversations about, okay, like here's what I'm good at right now. Here's what the company needs, and I think that like you need someone better than me at running this machine. I wish I were the person, but I just think that it's time for me to cycle downstream again, right?
Yeah.
And so I did, and like I said, I still go visit the building and hang out with the teams all the time, as much as I can. And that put me into a zone where I was doing a lot of like startup advisory in St. George, and kind of like down in the trenches with founding teams and just helping them to think through like early customer acquisition and like fundraising guidance. Not that I had a ton of experience, but I just was a helpful extra, set of eyes on some of the problems they were trying to attack.
Got it. And was that stealth? Is that a different?
No, that was just with a variety of startups that are in St. George. But when I started working on Stanza, we didn't want to make any noise prematurely because it was stealth mode.
Okay, got it.
And
nice.
You're probably getting that off of LinkedIn, and LinkedIn doesn't have they don't have a clean way of saying, hey, I'm working for a thing, but we're in stealth mode.
Got it.
And so there's this like shell thing on LinkedIn called Stealth.
Hey, that works.
And if you look through the Stealth org, there's like 1 trillion people, and they're all founders and CEOs and CTOs and co-founders. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe there is some other rando company out there called Stealth, and their metrics on LinkedIn are getting like completely destroyed by all these people that are actually just founding something in stealth mode.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, because I think I remember it was a little over a year or so that you were kind of in stealth earlier stage, and then you guys launched Stanza about a year ago or so. Is that right?
Yes. Last summer we started tinkering with like manual matchmaking. Okay. So I had just personally encountered this where I don't love working from home. I like being out and about with people, and I just like having the separation of like I work somewhere, and then when I come home, that separation exists. Yep. And so I wanted something that would be month to month and that would be reasonably affordable. And the only options were companies where that was their business model, right? And because that's their business model, they're like buying office space, and they're taking whatever their cost is, and they're just like 3 or 4xing their cost, and then that's what you pay. So the cost seemed really high to me for some of these like month-to-month options that were out there. And meanwhile, I'm like walking around and hanging out with my buddies at their companies and just observing with my eyes that their offices are like under-occupied. Mm-hmm. I'm walking into companies and their businesses, and I'm like, well, does anyone use this office? Well, we might hire somebody in 6 months. And that was where this thought process sort of came from, was to say, well, maybe there's a lot of that out there. I don't know how many people are looking for it, and I don't know how much of this there is, but let's tinker with this and let's see, because I sure wish this was something that I could use. And so we started doing manual matchmaking. This is me like being way long-winded on what we were doing last summer. So last summer, I started calling friends with companies that had a couple extra rooms, calling friends that were working from home, and I'd go like matchmake them, and they'd go work out of the room, and I'd say, just tell me what the experience was like. Did you enjoy working in somebody else's office space? Was it productive? Was the internet good? Just like the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, tell me what that was like. And the feedback was good enough that we started building a platform, and we launched it. We launched the first iteration in October and got everything wrong. So that iteration was designed for people who work from home, who every once in a while might want to go work out of an office once or twice a month. So it was very instrumented towards like hourly and daily usage.
Okay.
And just from existing, which I thought that would be what everyone wanted to do. But the inbound requests that we were getting were almost exclusively from people saying, yeah, I looked at your thing. Do you have anything that's just month to month? And I'm happy to work inside somebody else's office, but I want to go in every day, and I'll commit to like multiple months. I just don't know if my team is going to be double in 6 months or if we're going to be out of business.
Sure.
And so we really need that month-to-month flexibility. And when all of the leads were coming in that way, like literally, I think we got about 40 leads in the course of 2 months just from word of mouth in St. George. And 38 of them were that. Mm-hmm. And the other 2 were like somebody looking for a conference room for a training, or those were the other 2.
Yeah.
So we retooled the platform and rebranded, and that launched in February, and then we've kind of opened up Salt Lake, and now we've got things brewing all over the country actually now. So
wow,
yeah, it's been fun.
That's exciting, man.
Yeah, it's so fun. Like we reach out to brokers and office space agents, and we've made the decision philosophically that we want to lean in. We want to like join hands with that ecosystem, because they're like a skeleton key. They have relationships with all of our potential hosts, all the inventory landlords, or with subleases, or with like tenants that want to rent out a couple of rooms. Like they already own all of those relationships. Mm-hmm. And oh, by the way, they also get like 1,000 calls a year from people looking for temporary space.
Yep.
But because of the way that their sort of model works, they basically just have to tell those people no all the time. And it's not that they don't want to help. It's that it is impossible for them to make money by helping with those requests.
Right.
The cost of their time is just upside down.
Yeah, because brokers are paid on commission, and if it's a 3-month lease, it's the same amount of paperwork. It's the same legal.
Yes, exactly. Time. There's like a fixed effort, fixed paperwork, independent of like the length of contract or the price in some cases.
And I agree. Brokers are really for us as a developer, acquirer of apartments and stuff. It really, they are a lifeblood, because they have the relationships. They know all the owners. They know the sellers. They know the landlords, and so that's really smart. Yeah. So I'm curious, in terms of the initial early stages when you guys were stealth and developing the software. I always like to understand how you guys went from zero to getting it a full platform launched and funded. Did you?
Yeah.
So tell us maybe a little about like the coding, how you guys outsourced that, or did you do it yourself? And then like the funding, did you raise capital? Was it bootstrapped?
We're bootstrapped, and we started by building the platform on a no-code, on a no-code tool.
Okay.
And after about 6 weeks of doing that, I think like the nature and the complexity of what we needed it to do was such that we realized we were literally better off just hiring a developer and work, getting that custom built. Mm-hmm. So we ended up abandoning the no code idea and did a bespoke development of the platform.
Got it.
So yeah.
You're the key founder. Are there others involved? You have partners?
Jensen Warnock is co-founder and CTO. So he runs all the dev side of the platform and roadmap and so forth. Yeah.
Is he related to Greg Warnock?
He is.
He is? Okay.
He is.
So I had Andrew Smith in here yesterday with Savory Fund.
Yes.
Who they're partners.
Yes.
So I don't know Greg personally, but I've heard he's a good dude. So
yes. And we became friends a couple years ago, and I would say it was about 2 years ago that we really started like hanging out more and talking about like our philosophies of business. And I found so much alignment with like the way he sees the world. We've had maybe different life experiences, and yet I really love like his philosophy. I love kind of the way he interacts. I think there's huge cultural alignment. Like we're very different people in a lot of ways, and yet we line up so perfectly in terms of like, how do you treat people? How do we disagree with each other? How do we create healthy conflict? Like I mean, maybe I'm biased, but I feel like we're awesome at it, right? Like we never have a problem disagreeing. and yet I feel like we always do it in a way that is healthy and productive.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the value of a good partner can't be understated. I mean, there's so many benefits to just bouncing ideas, accountability, all of that. When it goes into starting a company.
Yes, totally agree.
Well, yeah, in terms of you guys relaunched, I guess February. You're in Utah right now and looking to expand. I think it's such a great concept because, to your point, like you look at traditional office space, you're not going to be able to get a month-to-month lease, or it's very hard to. And then you look at WeWork or Kiln or some of these other concepts where it's very amenitized, and the markup you pay for that premium. Because I was in a WeWork for about 3 months, and it's a great product, but it is expensive, and I was just paying for like the desk
picnic
out
table.
Open. You come pick a table, you open your laptop, and you're just jamming, right?
Yes.
But I'm thinking about it now. I was like, wow, it would be really nice to have a month to month, your own dedicated kind of area and office. And on the landlord side, it's like if I'm an owner, and I'm curious, do you guys contract with the tenant or with the landlord? Because if a tenant has extra offices, you probably partner with them, right? Do you have to get the landlord's permission to do that, or how does
yes,
that,
everyone that's a host, wherever they are on the stack, right? They warrant to us that they have permission to use the space thusly, right? And the model, like the co-working model, is one that I really love. I also have used WeWork. I used WeWork when I was working in London, and I've worked out of the kilns here, and it actually is like the kind of space that resonates for me personally. Mm-hmm. So I'm like a good target ICP for I think the co-working model.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of having options, right? So anyone who is looking for the community and for the events and for the instrumentation that co-working provides is going to sign up with that. And in fact, we have some co-working facilities where they list some of their properties with us.
Oh, cool.
So we very much are like friendly and happy to coexist with co-working, and it's just not our business model. Mm-hmm. We talk to some hosts where they're like a local services company maybe, and they've got 1 or 2 empty offices, and it's up to them like what the price is that they want to get for their monthly rent. And what is cool and interesting to see is that they're not going out there with their measuring tape and like pulling out the blueprints and saying, yes, this is 300 square feet of space, therefore with a cost per square foot per year, this is what the price should be per month. They don't even think about that at all. They're completely like decoupled from the traditional econometrics of office space. Mm-hmm. And these people will just say, well, if I could make $500 per month or $400 per month or $800 per month on this space, then I would feel like it's worth it. And if it was less than, some threshold, then it probably wouldn't be worth it. So that's my price. Yep. And so it's usually those lower price points. And what's cool is that maps really well to the people that are looking for space, who are less stressed about like the colors and the shapes. Mm-hmm. They're like hyper focused on, I need a desk and I need the internet. And whatever room you stick me into, like I'll fill it with my own hopes and dreams and culture and sounds and shapes and ideas, because I'm, that's what like that customer profile looks like. That's looking for that kind of space. And so those price points, it's just unlocking this really interesting new tier of inventory that doesn't require any capital cost. Like it's already there.
Yeah.
And it's everywhere.
Right.
It's all around us. Like people, sorry, I'm going on and on, but like we probably compete more with Starbucks than with anything else in the world.
Sure.
Because there's a Starbucks or a coffee shop within 5 minutes of everyone's house. And guess what? There's available workspace also within probably 5 minutes of everyone's house. They just may not, those tenants that are in control of that space, they just might not know it yet that they have this option.
Yeah. It's genius, man. It's really smart, because I'm thinking about even, Utah, right? Like, so I live in Lehigh, which is like Silicon Slopes, and great office submarket for sure. I mean, there's been a lot of activity, but I know there's sublease space coming online, and as the office market has evolved over COVID in the past few, 2 years, I'm sure that there is a lot of pent up demand from people who are sick of working from home, don't want to sign a year lease, but also don't want to pay the premium WeWork. And it's like, I just want to go drive 5 minutes down the road to this Class B office space where some tech company or call center is leasing, and they probably have 3 offices that are empty.
Yes.
You know, it's like a very niche thing where they can just slot in there for 4 or 5 months. And I love it, man. It's a great idea.
Thank you. It doesn't have to be right for everybody. It just has to. I just think it deserves to exist as one of the options on the spectrum of workspace. And I think I had this experience in the late 2000s working from home, and thought it was probably it was 4 years. I worked from home for 4 years, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. Right? I picked up bonsai. I wrote a rock opera. I was living this great life, right? and still like delivering my deliverables, but boy, I felt like I had the freedom to, really do all this extra stuff. And it wasn't until I got recruited into the St. George startup that I was essentially, it was a forcing function getting me back into an environment where I was surrounded by humans. And getting into the office at like 7 o'clock in the morning to run calls with Europe, and staying until 7 or 8 o'clock at night to run calls with New Zealand, and everything in between. And that was a formative experience for me, because I think that right now, right post-COVID, there's a lot of people that have been working from home now for 2-3 years, actually.
Yeah.
And I think it's really easy for a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, I totally believe in the nobility of remote work empowerment and making it possible for people to work in very creative, flexible ways, kind of wherever is convenient for them. 1,000,000,000% believe in the nobility of that. What I would add to that is that anyone who is ambitious, anyone who wants to be a leader of people, anyone who wants to be inspiring, anyone who wants to disrupt, anyone who wants to do kind of these big, grandiose things with their lives and with their careers, they must put themselves in a position to have more human collisions. And it's hard to do that when you work from home, because you see the same things and you hear the same things all day long. Where it's almost like millions of years of evolution. Like there's these moments where a mutation happens, and suddenly off of that mutation, you have new species that evolve over time and space. And socially, and with capitalism, with the economic systems that we are a part of, the equivalent of those mutations is those moments of human collision. And the more of those moments that we architect into our lives, the more probability that we have of something magical happening. Like we're sitting in a room right now. I've never been in this room before. I am seeing shapes and colors in combination with each other that are net new inputs to my system. And that's the way that we get out of the routine of experiencing, 90 to 99% of just recycled thoughts every single day.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot innovate if your thoughts are being recycled every day. And so I believe in the nobility of making it easy for people who want to be impactful to find ways of working outside of them.
Yeah.
That's my really long pitch for the, everyone's doing their return to office things and they're getting it all wrong. But the nobility of getting humans back together that want to, that where that fits their persona, I believe in that. And I think that there's a bunch of people that do not want that, and there could be valid reasons for that. But they have to do that knowing that they're plateauing.
Yeah.
By and large.
Sure. I really,
and that could be okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. I really do, because I've even noticed that when I go do something new, especially with new people or interactions in a new environment that I haven't exposed myself to in some time, I almost have I do have the thought of, wow, how nice it is to do something new.
Yes.
It's like refreshing.
Yes.
It's almost like when you travel to a new country, or it's like a mini version of that where you're like, wow, this is a new experience. I'm really enjoying this. There's an interaction, there's stimulation. It's all of that. So
it's
I
sensational, right? It's sensational to our soul. And this might be you and me speaking with bias because of, the type of personalities that we are.
Sure.
And so that, deserves to be acknowledged. But that's this new equation that we are confronting, and like the landscape of office space is in a state of a little bit of chaos right now. People don't know, and that's because we're seeking a new equilibrium. People have scattered geographically, for one thing, so that creates challenges when you're dealing with physical space. And then on top of that, socially and emotionally and psychologically, there's a scatter as well of interest and willingness to kind of get out of the house and go back into an office. So it's a complicated formula. And I don't claim to have the right answer. I don't think there is a right answer. I think that there's like 10 trillion right answers. I think every zip code, every company, every employee, every team, every day of the week, they all have their own calculus for what makes sense. And it's going to be in a constant state of evolving and changing. So we just want to be one helpful ingredient that maybe can make an impact somewhere, in that equation.
Yeah, love it. So just as an example, let's say, there's a Vivint call center. It's just a Vivint office space in Provo. They've got extra office spaces they're not using. So right. Stanza, do you guys call up Vivint or some contact at Vivint in the, real estate department? Say, hey, we're Stanza, we're looking for extra space. Would you guys be interested in leasing that out? What's your availability? Are you usually working directly with the tenant, or do you need to call, let's say it's Boyer who owns the building, like how is that actually working?
We do all of it, and whichever path opens up,
okay,
we then expand it to the rest of the stakeholders that would need to be involved.
Okay.
So we reach out directly to companies that have space. We reach out to brokers and the agents and so forth,
sure.
that whole ecosystem. And I'll be at the building owner, the BOMA conference in, I think it's in a month and a half, in Kansas City. So all of those stakeholders are important for us to reach out to, and we just talk to everyone. And whoever responds, whoever picks up the phone, like that's our point of entry for that conversation. But it is important for the whole stack to be, on board for sure.
Right. And when you sign an agreement, let's say, Vivint's like, yeah, sure, we got 5 offices you guys can use. Is that, agreement?
It's a services agreement. So we're entering into a services agreement with whoever has control over the disposition of the space.
Okay.
And then we do a license agreement with our users.
Got it.
So there isn't really any traditional tenancy entitlement. So our users are getting access to space with the understanding that the whoever owns the space or whoever is running the space might need it back.
Yep.
And with proper notice, we would just move them to a different location.
Got it.
Just move them to other empty space.
Yeah, because most office leases allow for tenants to sublease within reason with to others and such.
Yeah.
And so, do you also work with a direct vacancy with a landlord? Like if there's a suite that 2,000 square feet, there's a bunch of offices in there that just isn't leased, and they've had it on the market for 3 years and nothing's happening. Would you guys go in and do a deal on something like that as well?
Yes. We don't have any current published listings for that, but that is a conversation that we've been having. There's a lot of demand for that.
Yeah.
And every landlord's different. Like some of them have different things that they want to be true or in place for those agreements. Mm-hmm. In the case of like a tenant that is already occupying the space and they're having someone be a guest in 1 or 2 rooms, that overcomes some things for us. Like the power and the HVAC are already essentially turned on. And so there's not a lot of like incremental cost for them to occupy it.
Yeah.
Internet's already lit up. Mm-hmm. And no one's all that stressed anymore about having guests on the network. Like no one cares anymore, right? That used to be a big deal 5 years ago or longer, right? But so it gets a little more complicated when the space is totally empty. But we have partnerships with like furniture companies and technology companies to, for when it makes sense to light it up and make it usable space for folks to come in.
That's great. Yeah. And how are you guys getting compensated? What does that look like?
We take a cut of like all the bookings that come through. Like we have a portion of that we keep based on the type of booking that it is and like the length of time. And then the rest, the lion's share, the vast majority just goes straight to the host.
Got it. Very cool. Well, what's the plan for Stanza? I mean, you guys are very, very new company, but what do you see, this looking like in 3, 5, 10 years? Is this kind of the next big thing for you, I assume?
It is. I think that what what we see in front of us is the potential to become by far the single most comprehensive data set of all corporate real estate or commercial real estate assets in the world, because we see this gigantic amount of inventory, like we were talking about, that could exist and is usable, but at the moment is like living in darkness. Like it's just totally obscured because there's no tool that's unlocked it. And then not only that, but going back upstream to subleases and direct leases and buildings for sale. And I don't want to like speak out of turn, right? And open the kimono too much, but we can already do all of that. And we're coming in as outsiders. And that gives us the ability to, I think, look at it and try to solve it in a different way, where we don't know what we shouldn't be able to do, right? And so that's, I know I didn't really assign like timestamps to it per se, but that's what we're on the verge of having at our fingertips. Like, it takes like 2 minutes to create a listing. It's so easy. And the model that we're working with right now is that there's no upfront cost to do anything with us. And so we're really reasonably confident that we can build out a pretty robust data set pretty quickly. And I see it as a bit of a land grab right now. I think that this was an idea that was a decent idea that didn't have a problem attached to it pre-COVID. I think that during COVID, it was not possible. And then as soon as COVID ended, that was like when the clock started ticking.
Yeah.
And like the hourglass got flipped over, and it's like, okay, this is a thing that people want. And I've seen it with my own eyes, the number of requests, unbelievable. This is a thing that people want, and it's doable. So it's just a matter of like, it's a market grab to me. So we have very aggressive plans for the rest of this calendar year to cover the United States and kind of focus on that. And then once we've got that model nailed down, I think we can go internationally. But we're already getting requests for other countries in North America as well as Europe.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, and in terms of competition, you mentioned it's a race to kind of get something done here. Have you seen competitors pop up? Is it like?
Yeah, it's there's adjacent competitors, I would say, right? So we see companies that are going after like making it easier to find fractional office space, or taking bigger spaces and kind of compartmentalizing, or taking co-working and making it sort of like micro co-working distributed in multiple places. There's lots and lots of aggregators out there for companies that are going to all the co-working facilities and listing their properties, as like an aggregation play. But they tend to be limited just to the co-working facilities.
Okay.
So there's a spectrum of people that we're seeing kind of dancing around the issue, and I love it. Like, to me, I want to be friends with everybody. Like, I don't feel like I have this angst about people competing. I feel like it's just one big victory pot for us all to play in. But yeah, I think that to be relevant, I think we are looking to expand throughout the country fast.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you're thinking about the right way in terms of competition. I think that's great. Well, last couple of questions for you, Matt. We'll wrap up here, man. Just in terms of when you think about entrepreneurship, starting a business, you've started a couple now. What advice would you have for somebody who's wanted to start their own company, has been on the sidelines, or just hasn't been able to execute on it? Is there any just generic, like, hey, entrepreneur, first time business advice you'd provide somebody?
It's hard to say like universally, right? But generally, I think that understanding your personal cash flows of your life is valuable. And if you're feeling the call and you're feeling the urge, and you see a path to solving something that you feel a lot of energy around, I would recommend to somebody to do as much of that as possible in kind of like the moonlight hours, without disrupting the cash flows of your life budget. Because I think that opens up a path to bootstrapping the early stages, which can be very valuable. Whereas not having that cash flow solved can create some unnatural pressures. Like the pressure of starting a company should really be focused on, is there a problem with a size attached to it, an addressable market that's big enough to be meaningful to whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish? And can I solve that and deliver it to a market where there are people willing to pay me money for what I can do for them?
Yep.
That's the thing, right? Like that it should be the thing. And when some of these other things are not really resolved in how your life operates, it creates distractions away from that very core thing of like, is there a problem? How big is it? How can I solve it? And how much money, like, can this model work? So I think that's probably the thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I love it. If you're stressed about, making rent the next month, or like, your mind's gonna go to, how can I solve that problem first?
Correct.
And it might compromise what you do in the business to try to shortcut.
Yes.
Or get something,
Which maybe you got to do it, but it has an impact on your timeline.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. Yeah. And then just something I ask all my guests, Matt, just when you think about life holistically, kind of backing up a little bit from business side or whatever.
Yeah.
Thinking about success, in the different buckets. How do you define, success or a life well lived for you?
Yes. For me, it's highly qualitative. And to me, success has been the pursuit of understanding myself, which I hope never has a destination. It's just a constant pursuit of like finding myself, and then lining up what I'm learning about who my like optimized self is with my interactions with the world around me. And whatever happens as a result of that, to me, is natural success. And I definitely, like, I wasn't thinking about talking about this, but in the last year and a half, I would say, maybe 2 years, it's almost like there's this version inside that of all of us, right? There's this version inside all of us that is in a constant state of synthesizing our inputs, like the chemical makeup, our bodies, the food that we eat, the experiences that we have, the memories that we're storing, and the things that are true about our nature. And it's in a constant state. That optimized self is in a constant state of like having a map for us. And the extent to which we line up with that internal version of ourselves, it kind of is the extent to which we will feel that sense of success for ourselves. And I have felt like that version of me is like exploding out of my skin. And it all started, about 10 years ago, I would say, when I jumped into the software startup space. And it's just been growing and growing and growing. And in the last year and a half, in particular, it has felt like overwhelming. And so I guess, I don't know if that's kind of a traditional answer or what you're looking for, but that notion of kind of being in alignment with whatever that internal optimized self is what I think is success, which gives a lot of space for anyone, right? Like, it doesn't have to be about what the outputs are.
Yeah, I love that, Matt. A common answer, and I think similar to what you're saying, is success is consistently trying to close the gap between who you are and what your potential is, or what your ideal self is.
Yes.
That internal core you talked about. And so
yes,
I think that's great. I love it. No better way to end. And again, I really appreciate you being here, Matt, and sharing your story.
Yeah, giddy up. Chase, this is dope.
Excited for you, man. Thank you for being here. If anyone is listening, for those listening, look up Stanza. I mean, if you guys are looking for office space, a shorter term solution, check them out. Growing company, and
we'll do like custom projects too. If you're running a company and half your team is scattered and remote and you don't know what to do, like, give us a call. We can go track down space and find something that works. And if we don't, then you didn't pay anything. So
yeah. Love it, man.
That's my pitch.
I love it. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again, Matt. Appreciate the conversation, man.
Okay. Love you all.